For 3 straight weeks, Captain Anya Sharma's hands shook so badly she couldn't hold a pistol steady. Her squad called her Jitters, a cruel nickname whispered just loud enough for her to hear. But they had no idea she was about to become the deadliest person on this entire godforsaken base. The Nevada sun was a merciless hammer, beating down on the cracked earth of the firing range and baking the smell of cordite into the air. For everyone else, this was routine qualification. For Anya, it was a recurring nightmare. The M17 pistol felt like a block of ice in her grip, heavy and alien. The tremors started in her fingers, a faint vibration that quickly crawled up her forearms until the weapon's sights danced uncontrollably against the distant target. She squeezed the trigger, but it was more of a flinch. The shot went wide, kicking up a puff of dust 10 feet from the silhouette. Sergeant Gunner, a man whose face was as weathered as the surrounding mountains, let out a sigh that was louder than any gunshot. He didn't even look at the pristine, unhit target. He just looked at her, his expression a mixture of pity and frustration. Later, in the sterile, air-conditioned silence of her commanding officer's office, the verdict was delivered. Major Evans, a man who spoke in the clipped, precise tones of a legal document, didn't waste words. "Captain, this can't continue." He slid a folder across his polished desk. Operation Chimera, the largest joint force exercise this base has ever seen. It begins next week. You will be evaluated. If your performance is deemed a liability to your team, this medical discharge becomes effective immediately. He tapped the folder. It wasn't a threat. It was a statement of fact. For Anya Sharma, the clock was ticking. Away from the gunpowder and judgment of the range, there was another world. The Drone Intel Center, known unofficially as the Icebox, was a stark contrast. It was a dark, cold room, humming with the quiet power of servers and cooled by an Arctic blast of air conditioning. Here, the only sound were the soft clicks of keyboards and the low murmur of analysts. And here, Captain Anya Sharma's hands were perfectly still. She sat before a bank of glowing monitors, her eyes scanning terabytes of aerial surveillance footage from a recent reconnaissance mission. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, zooming, panning, and marking coordinates with an effortless grace. While a multi-million-dollar AI pattern recognition program had flagged the area as clear, Anya's eyes caught something else. A flicker, a single pixel that seemed wrong. She rewound the footage, magnified it 400%, and applied a thermal overlay filter. There, almost invisible against the rocky terrain, was the faint heat signature of a buried communications cable leading to a camouflaged antenna. It was a ghost, and she had just caught it. Marking a potential hostile command node, she said into her headset, her voice calm and steady. Grid 3-4, Niner. Recommend a follow-up flyby. That evening, the mess hall buzzed with the loud confidence of soldiers who dealt in absolutes. At the center of the noise was Lieutenant Jake Bulldog Miller and his team. Miller was built like a linebacker, with a granite jaw and an ego to match. He and his men, the brawny Torres and the sharp-tongued Chun, were the epitome of frontline warriors. They moved with a swagger that announced their superiority over anyone who didn't carry a rifle for a living. You hear this Chimera op is going to be run by the nerds in the box. Miller boomed, loud enough for half the room to hear. Gonna have some chair force hero telling us where to walk based on a damn spreadsheet. His team chuckled. His eyes landed on Anya, sitting alone in a corner, methodically eating her meal. He saw an easy target. With a smirk, he sauntered over, his tray clattering down on her table. "Well, if it isn't Captain Sharma," he began, his voice dripping with condescension. "Heard you set a new record on the range today. Lowest score in base history. Don't worry," he leaned in conspiratorially. "I'm sure you can type the enemy into submission." Torres and Chun snicker behind him. Anya didn't look up from her plate. She didn't grant him the satisfaction of a reaction. But beneath the table, her right hand slowly, deliberately, clenched into a white-knuckled fist. From across the room, Master Sergeant Frank Carter watched the exchange. Carter was a base institution, a man who had seen generations of soldiers come and go. He saw Miller's arrogant bullying, and he saw Anya's controlled silence. But he also saw something else. He saw the girl who couldn't hit a stationary target, yet whose intel reports were so preternaturally accurate, they were becoming legendary among the senior command. The two images didn't add up, and Carter was a man who hated unsolved equations. The conflict didn't take long to escalate from mess hall taunts to the tactical briefing room. It was a red team scenario, a preliminary exercise to test unit cohesion before Operation Chimera. Anya, in her capacity as the team's intel analyst, stood before a large digital map, her laser pointer hovering over a narrow canyon pass. Based on enemy doctrine and terrain analysis, she stated, her voice professional and detached, there's a 92.7% probability of an ambush at this choke point. I recommend an alternate route through the eastern ridge. It will add 3 hours to your infiltration, but it will bypass the kill zone. Lieutenant Miller, leaning back in his chair with his arms crossed, let out a short, derisive laugh. A 92.7% probability? He mocked, looking around at the other officers. Did your computer tell you that, Captain? This is what I'm talking about. Analysis paralysis. He stood up and walked to the map, his large frame eclipsing Anya's. He pointed a thick finger at the canyon. This is the fastest way. My men trust their guts and their rifles, not some coward's algorithm. He looked directly at the commanding officer. Sir, we're taking the direct route. We're not afraid of a fight. The CO, a man who valued aggressive action, hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Proceed, Lieutenant. Anya watched them go, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. 2 hours later, the radio crackled to life, not with a success report, but with the flat, emotionless voice of an exercise umpire. Bulldog Squad has entered the designated kill zone. Multiple IEDs and heavy machine gun fire. Bulldog Squad is Kia. All members. End of exercise. The debriefing was brutal. Instead of accepting responsibility, Miller went on the offensive. The intel was faulty, he declared, his face red with fury. The timing was off. We were sent in blind by the nerds in the box who can't tell the difference between a real threat and a shadow on their screen. He didn't name Anya, but he didn't have to. Every eye in the room turned to her. She stood silent, the official scapegoat for his arrogance. Her career wasn't just on a thread anymore. It was hanging over a cliff. That night, Master Sergeant Carter was doing his final rounds when he saw a single light glowing from the main command center. He pushed the door open to find Anya standing alone in the cavernous, dark room. She was before the primary holographic map table, a massive three-dimensional representation of the entire training area. But she wasn't just looking at it. She was conducting a symphony of war. Red Cell moves to high ground, denies air support, she whispered, and 100 red icons flowed up the holographic mountains. Blue Team feints west, draws their QRF, while a secondary unit exploits the gap from the south. Blue lights darted and weaved in a complex, deadly ballet, all orchestrated by her quiet commands. She was running dozens of scenarios simultaneously, her mind processing tactical variables at a speed Carter had never witnessed. He was watching a grandmaster play 100 games of chess at once. This wasn't analysis. This was something else entirely. This was a form of combat intuition so advanced it looked like magic. He stepped out of the shadows. "What are you doing, Captain?" he asked softly. Anya turned. Her eyes, usually guarded, were now blazing with an intense, focused light. "I'm finding the geometry they can't see, Master Sergeant," she replied, her voice filled with a strange, quiet power. The geometry of the fight. In that moment, Carter knew. The shaking hands, the failed tests. It was all a distraction. Anya Sharma's true weapon wasn't a gun. It was her mind. Operation Chimera began under a sky the color of bruised steel. The scale of the exercise was immense. A sprawling war game involving thousands of soldiers, tanks, and aircraft. In what felt like a final, cruel twist of fate, Captain Anya Sharma was assigned as the dedicated intel support for Lieutenant Miller's Bulldog Squad. For Miller, it was an insult. For the command, it was a last-ditch test. For Anya, it was the end of the line. The first few hours unfolded as expected. Miller ignored her intel, relying on his team's aggressive tactics. They completed a few minor objectives through sheer force, reinforcing his belief that her cautious analysis was unnecessary. Anya sat in the command tent, a ghost at the feast, logging their movements and knowing that every small victory was leading them deeper into a trap of their own making. Then, everything changed. A voice, calm and authoritative, cut through the command channel. It was the exercise director, the god in this machine. "Execute blackout protocol," he commanded. "I repeat, execute blackout protocol." Now, across the entire 50-square-mile training area, technology died. A simulated electromagnetic pulse, EMP, had been detonated. The massive screens in the command center dissolved into a blizzard of static. GPS signals vanished. High-bandwidth communications ceased. The entire digital nervous system of a modern army was severed in a single, silent stroke. Deep within the MOUT facility, a disorienting maze of concrete buildings designed to simulate urban warfare, Miller's squad was suddenly blind, deaf, and alone. Their high-tech helmet displays went dark. Their radios hissed with useless static. "Command, this is Bulldog, do you copy?" Miller yelled into his handset. Only white noise answered. The comforting eye in the sky was gone. They were trapped. Panic began to ripple through the command center. Analysts stared uselessly at their dead screens. Officers shouted conflicting orders that went nowhere. The entire operation had ground to a halt, paralyzed by the loss of its technological senses. In the midst of the escalating chaos, one person remained perfectly still. Anya Sharma stood up and walked through the frantic crowd to the exercise director's platform. Her voice was quiet, yet cut through the noise like a surgeon's scalpel. "Sir," she said, "give me control of a Raven." The director stared at her as if she were insane. The RQ-11 Raven was a primitive, hand-launched drone, little more than a glorified hobbyist plane. It had no thermal imaging, no laser designator, no encrypted data link. It had a simple, low-resolution black and white camera that transmitted over an outdated analog frequency. It was a relic. "What for, Captain?" "It's a toy." Anya's gaze was unwavering. "I don't need to see their faces, sir," she said, her voice ringing with an unshakable certainty. "I just need to see their shadows." For a long moment, the director just looked at her. This captain on the verge of being discharged, this analyst whose hands shook on the firing line. He saw the desperation of his own situation reflected in her calm eyes. He had nothing to lose. "Do it," he barked to a nearby tech. "Get her a link to that damn Raven. Now!" A technician scrambled to connect an old joystick and a grainy monitor. Anya slipped on a headset, her movements fluid and precise. She found a clean analog channel, a forgotten back road on the information superhighway. Her voice, when it crackled to life in Miller's earpiece, was unrecognizable. The hesitation was gone. The tremor was gone. It was replaced by a voice of pure, cold command. "Bulldog, this is Valkyrie. I have tactical command. Acknowledge." Miller, huddled with his men behind a burned-out bus, was stunned. Valkyrie? That was a call sign he hadn't heard in years, a legend from the early days of the drone program. "Valkyrie, who is this?" he demanded. No time, a voice snapped back. "You have a 4-man hostile team closing on your position from the east alley. On my mark, move west into the 2-story tailor shop." "Mark." Miller wanted to argue, but instinct took over. "Move," he yelled, as his team scrambled across the street. A volley of simulated machine gun fire erupted from the exact spot the voice had indicated. They would have been annihilated. From that moment on, the battlefield was transformed. For Miller's team, it was like a god had started whispering the enemy's secrets in their ears. For Anya, it was a master playing her instrument. The blurry, monochrome feed from the Raven was all she needed. She wasn't just seeing soldiers. She was seeing patterns, angles, and probabilities. She was seeing the geometry of the fight. "Torres, 2nd-story window, on your right. He's reloading. You have 3 seconds." The simulated sound of a sniper round being chambered was cut short by Torres's burst of fire. "Chun, there's an IED tripwire across the doorway in front of you." Go through the wall to the left. It was a stunning performance of remote warfare. Anya's mind processed the battlefield faster than any computer, her instructions turning Bulldog Squad from a trapped unit into an unstoppable force. They moved through the city with a terrifying grace, always one step ahead of their enemy. They weren't just surviving, they were hunting. The fear in their eyes was replaced with awe, then with absolute, unshakable faith in the voice on the radio. 47 minutes later, Miller stood over the dead body of the opposing force's commander. His squad hadn't suffered a single casualty. He keyed his mic, his voice hoarse with disbelief. Valkyrie, objective secured. How did you? The voice on the other end was quiet again, the fire gone, replaced by the familiar tone of Captain Sharma. Good work, Bulldog. Valkyrie out. The main debriefing room was packed and utterly silent. On the giant center screen, two feeds played side by side. On the right, the grainy, almost abstract black and white footage from the Raven drone. On the left, helmet cam footage from Miller's squad. And over it all, the audio of Anya's calm, precise prophetic commands. No one moved. No one spoke. They were witnessing the deconstruction of a battle, the work of a master artist. When the recording finished, Lieutenant Miller stood up. He walked across the room, stopping directly in front of Anya, who sat in the back row. He looked at her, not with arrogance or pity, but with a profound, humbling respect. "Captain," he said, his voice clear and steady for the entire room to hear. "I was wrong. You are not a liability. You are a weapon, and I apologize for my ignorance." Before anyone could react, the exercise director took the podium. He held up a single sheet of paper, Anya's pending medical discharge. He tore it in half, then tore it again. "Effective immediately," he announced. "We are creating a new command position, Chief Tactical Architect for Joint Operations. Captain Sharma, the job is yours." Later that evening, Master Sergeant Carter found her in the now-quiet Intel Center, gently cleaning the lens of a drone camera. "I have to ask, Captain," he said softly. "Your hands." Anya held out her right hand. In the dim light of the monitors, it was still trembling, a slight but constant tremor. "The trauma is real, Master Sergeant," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "My last mission overseas, I was piloting a Reaper. I watched a friendly convoy get ambushed. I saw everything, heard their calls on the radio, but my only weapon was a camera." Her eyes were distant. "My hands haven't stopped shaking since that day. They'll never be steady enough to hold a weapon again." She paused, then tapped her temple with her index finger. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "But in here," she said, "the battlefield is perfectly still. My weapon was never in my hands." Have you ever been underestimated because of a weakness people could see, while your greatest strength remained hidden? In a world of changing warfare, who do you think is the more valuable soldier? The one with the steadiest hand, or the one with the clearest mind? Drop a comment below with your thoughts, and type "Respect for Captain Sharma." Your insights help shape the stories we tell next. And if this story reminded you that true strength isn't always visible, hit that like button and subscribe for more.